So let's call the meeting to order, folks, and thank you all for being here. To be clear, we heard House Resolutions, 141 earlier, at an earlier meeting. It was presented by Ms. Stokes, and she had with her a couple of the organizations that in the original measure were proprietary organizations that were mentioned specifically, and some of them spoke to some of the kind of very focused type of care they're doing in these smaller environments. So we've had that before. Now we're here to take up the measure. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a resolution that deals with the subject actually we had even last year, and the need for this actually was also exacerbated by COVID. I mean, we saw what was going on in some of the extended living facilities, the nursing homes, and places with large populations, and the outcomes that we had with that. This is a resolution that calls for a more broader approach to long-term living, assisted living, or smaller group homes. It's not for everyone, but it's an addition to what we have, and we're all moving in that direction, hopefully. If we don't get in that direction, then we didn't do something right in life. But it's about choice, and I think it's a very good measure, and it's a good thing to study. It's a good thing for us to take a look at. And if you'd like to speak to the substitute, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. All right, so members, let me do this. So you have a substitute before you, and I'm going to show you what has been changed since we had the original hearing on this. And but to begin, I will tell you the goal has been to make this more about more broad than is the best way I would describe it than it was initially presented. As it was initially presented, you'll recall there was a lot of language here about the Eden Project and another project, which are, again, proprietary groups. And so what we've done here is made this more about the broadest context of residential settings. If we're going to study it, let's study it more broadly, if that makes sense. Let's talk about smaller person-centered models. But let's also talk about, we had another measure that was introduced, another bill that was introduced to this committee that we did not hear, that I felt like was inappropriate at the time to hear. That measure dealt with just making all assisted living available to Medicaid. Obviously, that is an enormous cost to the state, and that's not something we can do lightly. So what we did, we changed the language here to where we can include all of those kind of things to study Medicaid, study some of the regulatory challenges of the industry, study different settings to include where the chairman began early on, small, very consumer-focused care, but do all of that in totality, if that makes sense. So having said that, let me show you where the changes are. If you will look on line 32, you'll see again, I know you're not, if you're like me, you're not looking at the earlier version, but what we do here, everything you see up to line 32 is original language from the earlier version. It says here in line 32 and line 33, whereas having diverse options of long-term care in the community is beneficial to consumers and their quality of life and to taxpayers. So we've added that language. Line 34 and 35 was already in the earlier measure as it spoke to exploring Medicaid reimbursement rates to incentivize the adoption of this person-centered model. And then we've added lines 36 through 40. And so we say there, starting on line 36, whereas options can be explored to reduce Medicaid costs by providing lower cost models of care, and whereas burdensome rules and regulations increase costs and have a profound impact on the availability and accessibility of private sector and government reimbursed long-term care. And then you go back, again, 41 was already in the bill where it talks about studying tax credits and other measures we can do to make sure that we have not only enough capacity to serve our growing population of seniors, but also that we provide a multitude of options. And so I think we've made this a broader view of study than making it too narrow and defined, and that was, I think, my general concern about the original language. That is what we've done with this measure, and I think we were able to incorporate some of the other things, some other ideas that came to us that we weren't able to move, such as Chairman Cooper's bill on Medicaid in all assisted living. So that way we continue to have these conversations, discuss them, discover their cost, but I think this is a better move forward. So any questions from me or the chairman? Any questions from the members? Okay. Representative Campbell.
It sounds like a very interesting and timely study, and certainly needed. And I would just maybe ask the question, I know we've highlighted here several times affordability specific to Medicaid. And wouldn't it be in the spirit of inclusivity and broadening the research, interesting also to look at all options for pay, so private, Medicare, veterans, et cetera. Just thinking about this again in the most expansive terms possible, given the enormous percent of our population that will have needs for living, for care, for support, for giving back to our communities.
Yeah, I agree. This study should not be limited to those feasibilities that only include Medicaid, because then Medicaid payment we know is low. And so we don't want to stop just at where that ends, but look at public, private, or just totally private even, small group homes. I think, I agree with you. We need to look at all the options. And so I would say, let's just don't focus on the Medicaid, let's look at all of it. And I think that would be, this provides a wide berth for the study committee to work off of.
That's what we've done. And so all of those things you described would be contemplated in this measure. We need to talk about the private sector. In fact, we allude through here some of the, one of the things that Representative LaHood knows quite well is the more we have to always seek the best of quality. But every time we raise the cost of providing care, it makes it more difficult for the private sector to afford it, which means folks lose access to that care. And then what happens is, as in the skilled nursing industry, about 73% of skilled nursing facility residents are on Medicaid. And so we want to try to encourage people to take care of themselves, not to be dependent on government, but we want to make sure that we have the best quality of care when they are dependent on government, or whether they're private pay, it doesn't matter. So we're going to be exploring all of that. Private sector, Medicaid, Medicare pays nothing currently in this state for any kind of outside of skilled nursing, for any kind of assisted living in this country, in fact, not just in Georgia. But we can consider all of those things. Representative is, who do we have, 17? Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this. Mr. Chair, I would want to point out that maybe do we need to add a little bit of a language change in lines 34 and lines 36. It looks like that lines 34 and lines 36 are the enabling action items. And so might I suggest an amendment to add the language to explore the private sector as well? Because that looks like it's the activation of the legislation.
I think that's good advice. I'm looking at it now. So tell me what you propose. Excuse me. Tell me what you propose in terms of the language. You just capture the private sector, right? That's what you're speaking to make it clear.
Yes, sir. I mean, it looks like 34 and 36, where it says options can be explored too, would be the activating lines in the legislation. So if we just add to use Medicaid reimbursement rates or all types of payment or private, this isn't my, right in the words, Betsy. We need some help here.
I'm trying to, kind of understand.
Thankfully, we have Betsy. Let's think about that. So yes, the goal would be to explore options in their entirety.
Like, you talking about private payers?
Yes, just
Well, so those really are considered private most of the time. But hold on one second. So let's just keep discussing this. Is that you, Representative Scott, to speak? 27? Who's 27?
It's me.
Oh, that's LaHood. I'm sorry. Representative LaHood.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Fry, for bringing that
Oh, I'm
up.
sorry.
Maybe, are we looking at a new whereas line? Or were you suggesting add it to the existing whereas line 34?
Just maybe an amendment to where it says options, maybe a line that says either recognizing all finance options or exploring all finance options, just to make sure that that's included, so our intent is clear.
So this is all helpful. Let's keep talking about, remember, when we talk about incentivizing, the incentive from the private sector is already there. But let's keep talking. We have several more questions before we flesh this out. Wait a second. We have my vice chair here. Let's get him first.
No, I was just thinking, Representative Fry, reimbursement models. We look at all reimbursement models, Medicare and private. Does that sound better?
Medicaid and private, yeah. Medicare again, Medicare as well. Medicare is paying
Yeah.
for a great deal, probably 10% of your skilled nursing facility
Yeah.
beds. So it's an important piece as well.
And they also
Yes.
pay for the physical therapy and ancillary things like that as well.
Yeah, and we used government reimbursed in one of these to try to capture all of that.
Okay.
We use the term, in line 39, we use government reimbursed to kind of capture Medicaid and Medicare. We could do the same thing, but we'll continue to let's continue to
Thank
get
you,
good
Mr. Chairman.
discussion before we make a decision. Thank you, Representative Cameron. Representative Campbell again.
Chair.
I have, okay.
I think maybe we've just covered it. I was just going to suggest either we add to that line or we strike Medicaid so that it is inclusive of all, not just reimbursement scenarios or opportunities, but really financing. I mean, if the goal is broad and deep exploration, and if this is a population that we know is going to continue to grow and grow and grow across the board, the responsibility for us, if we're putting together a strategic vision for the state to care for one another, it would be inclusive of all of those entities and our consumers, our patients, not just the financing opportunities for the companies, the organizations, and the providers, but also for our patients. So I know we're combining things, and my intention is not that singular line, but the broader conversation throughout the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, could I offer something here? With Betsy listening and looking on line 34, could we just say, whereas options can be explored of private funded facilities, including the use of Medicaid reimbursement rates?
Are you on line 34?
Mm-hmm. Can be explored after that. Of privately funded facilities, including the use of Medicaid reimbursement rates. So we cover private and Medicaid. I mean, I'm not centered just on Medicaid. I agree with the feeling of this committee is we need to look at all of it, not just one facet.
No, so on line 39, we say private sector and government reimbursed. Government reimbursed covers Medicaid and Medicare, which is almost the entirety of your skilled side.
Right.
It is now, to be clear to everybody on the committee, it is a minority, a small minority of assisted. Now, we're going to discuss more than just skilled nursing on this.
Right,
I think that's
right.
clear in the
Yeah,
language.
okay.
This is going to be about assisted and skilled. But on the skilled side, your government funded is almost all of it, not quite. And on the assisted side, the overwhelming, almost all of it is private sector. So I think we say private sector and government reimbursed. We kind of capture all of it. But again, let's keep talking. We got a few more questions, and then we're going to settle on something. I think that's Representative Lott.
Yes, sir, thank you. So as I read this, there's a lot of language up above, of course, that just the whereas. But the actual bill in line 51 states powers and duties of the committee the committee shall undertake a study of the conditions, needs, issues, and problems mentioned above. So as we get into the legislation, we're going to be able to cover all of that as it's written in this legislation, and as far as I can see, that we're not obligated to we're not obligated to just the words on this paper, but any needs, any issues. So I really feel like I think this is complete, but that's just my opinion on that, so.
Thank you, Representative Lott. I think that's a great point. Still, I think in the interest of clarity, it might be good to clarify, but I do agree that we're going to have broad range, and having been on several of these over the years, we pretty much have the ability to study very broadly. Okay, that is all of our questions. So let's see what Betsy recommends. Betsy's heard all of this, and she's, I can assure you, very dependable. Betsy, let's make sure you've got your mic. Where's she?
She doesn't have one.
Okay, on line 34, after the word rates, I'm proposing that you add or other public or private reimbursement models. So it would read options can be explored to use Medicaid reimbursement rates or other public or private reimbursement models to incentivize blah, blah, blah. If that gets at what y'all are trying to do.
All right, I think it does, Betsy, as you always do. Did everyone hear that? Or do y'all need me to say it? Do y'all all hear that well? She didn't have a mic. Say it, sir. Okay, so here's what 34 and 35 would become. Whereas options can be explored to use Medicaid reimbursement rates or other public or private reimbursement models to incentivize the adoption of person-centered models that elevate care in Georgia. So I think that captures the spirit of what we're speaking to. Does everyone agree with that? Okay, well, this sounds like a Fry amendment, so let's, when we get to that point, is that? All right, does everybody think that sounds like a good idea when we get there? All right, so, on line 36. All right, we have another recommendation from Betsy.
I was gonna propose that the word Medicaid be replaced with, the word healthcare, and then after the word cost, to add to patients and public and private payers. So it would read, options could be explored to reduce healthcare costs to patients and public and private payers by providing lower cost models of care.
Yes, sir. Hold on one second. Healthcare cost, scratching Medicaid. We replace Medicaid with healthcare. And then we replace,
Adding after cost to patients and public and private payers.
gotcha, to patients, and public payers.
And I don't know if y'all mentioned patients, but.
All right. Any comments about Betsy's recommendation there, trying to get to a consensus of all of our comments here? Does that, everyone feel good about that? Okay, all right. So I think we know what we need to do. Friday, you have all that real clearly? Because you started all this. You got to get it all. Wait, who started it? All right, y'all fight over who amends it, and we'll get, let's get to that point. He fried it. I tell you what. All right, guys, so let's get to the point. First of all, is there any further discussion more broadly? And then we'll take a motion. Okay, no further discussion. What is the will of the committee? All right. Motion to pass. We have a second. All right. And so I think now we're in the posture of amending this measure. We'll let him fry a little longer. Let's see. You ready? All right, you all right? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't had a last name joke in a long time since they called me French fry.
French fry. Yeah, high school was tough, wasn't it?
It was tough. So I guess I would like to make a motion to propose an amendment. Line 34 would read, to insert the words "or other private or public reimbursement models" after the word rates. And then, in addition, would be lines 36 to strike the word Medicaid and replace it with the word healthcare. And after the word costs, to add the words to patients and public and private payers.
Thank you, Representative Fry. Betsy, do you have that very clearly? Hey, wait a minute, it started with you. That's right. I mean, you straightened us out, let me say that. All right, we have the Fry amendment. Second, okay. All in favor of the Fry amendment? Aye. All opposed? All right, so this bill is now amended, okay? All right, now, any further discussion before we go back to the original bill? Substitute H.R. 141 as amended now. Substitute H.R. 141 as amended. Any further discussion? Okay, they're not. All in favor of substitute H.R. 141 as amended, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Chairman?
All right, thank you.
It's good.
Appreciate it.
It's unanimous.
I'm good, yeah. We got it.
This will be a good opportunity for us to really study. Oh, I need to say thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I want to tell the members before we leave, I want to make sure that we speak to this with Representative Bazemore. So we had a hearing that was very helpful on some concerns that some of our blind population have as it relates to one of our agencies. And so here's what we've done. I have reached out to them and I've had discussions with them. We're going to have them come and speak to us about some of those concerns because that measure, of course, would create a whole new agency, which is obviously a rather big task. What I think, and we discussed some of this at the time after the hearing, a better alternative might be to discover exactly, to get their response on some of the failures that we heard, and to understand how they're going to make this population, which is what they describe as a low-density population, thankfully, thank the Lord. There's not a large number of the disabled population that are blind to such a terrible disease and disability, but they have explained that they want to understand the concerns and do better and learn what they can to do better. So we're going to have them come present to us in the very near future, to make sure that we have not dropped that issue. No, it's not the department, but the vocational rehab. Yeah, the agency in question, yes. So they are spoken with them about our concerns and about our meeting, and they seem to be taking them very seriously. And the director has suggested he'd be glad to come speak to us all, and that's what I've asked him to do. Okay. Thank you. All right, we're adjourned.